Hey everyone. It's such a beautiful day. I'm just sitting out here on my back porch. And yeah, we have a topic to talk about, but I just want to take a few moments to just get quiet. No matter the topic, it's always a good time to settle in, relax, listen. Sitting out here on my back porch, I hear the sound of the birds. What do you hear? Sounds in the room with you. Sounds coming through my mic, my voice. Maybe even hear the birds or that saw a few houses over. I think this is a good topic, or this is a good way to start, especially on a topic like this: imposter syndrome. We're starting in a place of stillness, not only because that's usually what I'm going to do on these streams, regardless of the topic, but because this is a topic that can cause a lot of stress. And really, if you look at what various sites define imposter syndrome as, it always talks about the symptoms of imposter syndrome, and one of those is anxiety. So approaching imposter syndrome from a place of peace and quiet is probably a pretty good idea, so we can get a clear vision of it. So what's imposter syndrome? I'm going to define it my own way. I've heard it talked about for years now. But to me, imposter syndrome is that feeling that you have that you don't belong, despite having some training, despite finishing school. This could be a sense of not belonging in a profession, in a job, a spiritual community, in a role. It's a sense that you don't have what it takes, whether education, experience, etc. And the typical advice, and I just did some cursory searching. It's not like I spent hours looking or search. I didn't spend hours searching for information on imposter syndrome. Um, Frankly, I was kind of just confirming what I suspected, and that's the stuff. At least what you find at the top of the Google search results is all about overcoming imposter syndrome. But I didn't see any articles in the few that I looked at that talk about why you should overcome imposter syndrome. Why are we overcoming it? I want to know. I don't want to just assume I don't feel like I belong, so I need to overcome that. I don't know that is the only approach. Why do we need to overcome imposter syndrome? It's kind of given as universal advice how to overcome it. So I don't even want to go there. I'm not worried about overcoming it because I think there's a lot of fruit in imposter syndrome. So maybe you just take a moment right now and just get quiet for a second. Just for a few moments, feel into your body. Notice the ground supporting you, or the chair, or the bed, wherever you are. Notice what it feels like to be in your body. We're just going to go a little deeper, do some inquiry. This inquiry, whether it's this stream, another stream, this inquiry isn't a thinking process, that cogitation, the wheels turning. We get quiet so we can get beneath that surface level and get to the real answers. So you're settling in. Notice the breath that comes in and out. You could always take a hand to your chest, a hand to your stomach. Notice that breath. Any other way that you find yourself settling in, just a few more moments. We're going to settle in and get quiet. Noticing your breath. You might keep your eyes closed for a few moments here because I'm going to ask you a question. Where do you feel like an imposter in your life? Do you feel like an imposter in your profession? Do you feel like an imposter in a spiritual community, a church, a synagogue, a temple, another spiritual group? Do you feel like an imposter as a healer, someone who holds yourself out as a healer? Do you feel like an imposter as an attorney? Just listing some examples. That last one really hits home for me because I was an attorney for many years, and I'll talk about that quite a bit. Tell a little of my story about feeling like an imposter and why I say to use it, don't lose it, as all these sites will tell you how to do. So I'll give a little bit of background as an attorney, but frankly, what I really want to talk about is that imposter syndrome in the spiritual community, in the healing communities. Do you feel it? Do you identify with it? But it doesn't have to be that. You may feel it in your job. You may have an office job, factory job, in the trades. All right. So if you found yourself kind of wavering, or you thought of something and then discarded it, that's often the thing to go back to. So where do you feel like an imposter? Let's start there. I guess a good place to start would be, why do you feel like an imposter? Obviously, I can't hear you. This is for you. Sit with it. Why do you feel like an imposter? List it. You may have a notebook. Open it up. Start writing down positives in favor of being an imposter. You can put 2 columns on your paper if you want to. Why do you feel like an imposter? If you're in the healing profession, if you're a teacher, or hold yourself out as a spiritual teacher, why do you feel like an imposter? You don't have to write it down. Maybe just sit quietly, eyes closed. Allow those answers to come forth. Why do you feel like an imposter? Same thing on the other side. What's the argument against you being an imposter? And obviously, I'm not going to sit here for 10, 15 minutes and get quiet and give you time to write. I wish I had more time. So that may actually be an advantage. Just allow the first stuff to come out. That is often the right stuff. And then the mind wants to take over and kind of move things around, and the ego wants to feel better. So it's going to explain and twist and turn. So a lot of times just letting out that first stuff is going to be the most powerful stuff anyway. So I have a question. In this area, whether you're a teacher, healer, lawyer, whatever your profession, do you know everything there is to know in this area? Do you know how to solve every problem? On the other side, do you know how to solve many problems? Are you an expert? We're not going to get to the bottom of whether you're an imposter. We're really just kind of drawing out the positives and negatives just here. This is just the beginning of this process. And again, if you're just coming in, I encourage you to sit quietly. You may even close your eyes. If it's better for you to write, you can have your computer in front of you, notes on your phone, a notebook. But just quickly, positives and negatives. Am I an imposter? Why do I feel like an imposter? And what evidence do I have that I'm not? But that's often the advice you'll get from the various websites offering advice about imposter syndrome. But I really want to lean heavily into the arguments in favor of being an imposter. So I'm going to tell a little bit about myself, and maybe as I speak, you continue to write about why you feel like an imposter. So I think I felt like, now that I think about it, and I hadn't considered this before, I think the first time that I really felt like an imposter in my life is when I became a mathematics major in undergrad. In high school had never gotten beyond, I think it was geometry, maybe. I think we covered some trigonometry, but I don't think there was a trig class. I think that was part of geometry. So I, went decently far, but never took calculus, never took differential equations, nothing like that. Never even took pre-calculus. And then I'm in undergrad and I sign up to be a math major. because I don't remember why. I think it's because I also was a computer science major and I could just add on a certain number of classes and get that math major. And as I started to get deeper into mathematics, I was behind everybody else. I was the only person, without exception, I was the only person in my junior and senior level math classes who hadn't taken calculus until college. So I didn't have the deep background of experience that others had. I felt like an imposter. I wasn't as quick as the other students. Some of these people were absolutely brilliant. I'm certainly not brilliant at mathematics. And I'm talking about pure mathematics now, not calculus, but it's kind of a background. I wasn't brilliant at it. I had some things I'm really good at, and that's actually relevant, but I wasn't really brilliant at it. So I felt like an imposter. And yet when I got to the end of undergrad, I considered getting a PhD in mathematics. Instead, and this takes me to the big area where I felt like an imposter in my life, instead of getting a PhD in mathematics, where I would have struggled, frankly, I think I could have potentially done it, potentially finished. It would have been incredibly hard. I don't have that kind of brilliance, but I went to law school instead. Frankly, I don't know why I went to law school. I was talking to someone yesterday about it. I honestly went on a whim and went through law school. I worked my way through it. I don't think it's so much that I felt like an imposter in law school. It was not a great experience. It was a pretty terrible experience, honestly. But eventually, without telling my whole story, I took the bar exam and became an attorney. And strangely, I never worked for a law firm, except for a very brief month or two that I interned during law school, literally a month or two, in a family law firm, which I never practiced. They exclusively did family law, and I worked on one single case with a couple of issues. So it wasn't like it was experience that translated to my life as an attorney. I rented an office in Oakwood here in Dayton, Ohio, and decided to start taking on business as an attorney. So as you can probably guess, I felt like an imposter. And you know what? I was an imposter. And in these websites that would have told me how to overcome imposter syndrome, they would have told me, you have the education. Yeah, you don't have the experience, but you have the education. So let's move that needle. You're not an imposter because you have the education. Yeah, I went to law school. I passed. I took the bar exam. Technically, the Ohio Supreme Court said that I could practice law, but I didn't know what I was doing. I practiced tax, business, and estate planning law. The business was pretty easy, honestly, the business law, though still an imposter, but it was a little easier. But estate planning, wills, trust, powers of attorney, all that stuff. Now imagine my first clients as an attorney with my office in Oakwood. I have this beautiful big desk. They don't know how long I've practiced. They probably didn't look me up on the Supreme Court of Ohio's website. I don't even know where I got the forms I used. I honestly have no idea how I figured out how to prepare wills. I mean, I did take an estate planning class, one class in law school. And law school doesn't teach you how to draft wills. It talks about the law of wills, the law of probate, the law, trust law. And so I'm sitting there and I have, I think that first one, it was a couple, it was a lesbian couple before same-sex marriage. And so it was a little bit more complicated, not as complicated as what I eventually got into, but it was a little bit more complicated. And there's all these papers on the desk, and I hadn't even thought through the mechanics of how to get two people to sign multiple documents, some of which are signed by both, but most of which are signed by the individuals. So imagine that, this kind of reddish tint to the desk. It's this beautiful big desk, and there's paper everywhere. And I start moving them to get signatures, and it feels like a jigsaw puzzle with the pieces everywhere. So this is my first experience. So I don't know if you identify in any area of your life, but I was an imposter. I was an imposter. I didn't need to overcome my imposter syndrome. What I should have done at the time was get a job at an estate planning law firm. They probably were hiring, frankly, because I knew what I wanted to do. Because I had an LLM, a Master of Laws, a post-law degree in taxation, I probably could have gotten a good job once I took the bar exam. Don't ask me why I opened the law firm instead of instead of working for someone else. I think it was anxiety. Yeah, there's a massive amount of anxiety that comes with opening your own business, but I didn't have anyone looking over my shoulder. So I was an imposter. And like I said, I had a graduate degree in taxation. I took a massive course in estate planning in that graduate degree, but I was still an imposter because I didn't know practically how these things work. I didn't know how to put the documents together. So I was an imposter. And eventually, I really did develop deep skills, and it didn't take very long. I picked it up pretty quickly. But in the beginning, I was an imposter. As a business owner, when I started my law firm, I was an imposter. I had studied business law. I studied taxation, a big part of business. But I understood business from the perspective of a tax attorney who understands tax law. I didn't. So I was even an imposter as a business owner. And throughout my law practice, I eventually got to competency as an attorney, as a business owner, but I was an imposter, and overcoming it, looking back, should have been a process of learning from those who have come before. And this is going to be a key point. But having the humility, and I don't know that it was a lack of humility at that point. Like I said, I think it was anxiety. And I don't know if you identify with that, but does anxiety stop you from asking for the help? Maybe not. Many people are better than I was at asking for help, but I really needed a mentor. And I did have this ostensible mentor, this older attorney from Xenia, but he really wasn't practicing estate planning law in a modern way. So it really wasn't all that helpful, frankly. But like a real estate planning attorney. And so I learned the hard way. And like I said, I got competent. I got really competent. I became an expert in my field. But what I did in the beginning as an attorney was absolutely the wrong way to go about doing it. And I would advise anybody who's going into any profession, but I can only speak as a former practicing attorney, is not a time to go in without that mentor, without that relationship, without somebody who can say, "Hey, you're ready," or someone, if you're working for them, to look over your work. And so I was an imposter, and overcoming that should have been done differently than I did. So I should have found an expert, should have worked under them, but I didn't. But that's not really what I'm here to talk about. This is just an example. I was an imposter, and I'm not going to tell the story. I tell it in a lot of streams, a lot of YouTube videos, but eventually I retired my law license and really just struggled. But the point I'm getting to is I always said I'm not a teacher. I meditated 25 years at that point, close to 25 years, and I'm not a teacher. Not a teacher. I'll never teach meditation. I don't even think I don't think I ever taught meditation, despite all this experience, all these years. And that was the right thing to do. So unlike when I became an attorney, I guess I maybe figured it out because of that experience that I probably should not have been teaching meditation. I was a mess. I was full of anxiety. Yes, I was capable of meditating and getting quiet, but my life was a mess. And I just had this feeling that as a teacher, if I were to teach, I needed to get my own life in order. And my life was not getting better. It was getting worse over time. And the problem I see, especially with spiritual teachers, with people that hold themselves out as healers, is that many times they are not healed themselves. Now, this can be okay. There's a couple ways to handle this, and this applies to other areas. There's a couple ways to handle it. You can certainly hold yourself out as a healer, but kind of explain. I've seen people do this. Hey, we're on this journey together. I'm on my own healing journey as well. And I'm not saying there's some ultimate kind of level of healing that happens. But the beautiful thing about imposter syndrome is it can make us honest about who we are, what our capabilities are, where we are. A lot of self-help is going to tell you to fake it until you make it. And they don't always use those words, but that's essentially what a lot of it is. It's fake it until you make it. Pretend. Hey, you got that certification in sound healing. Hold yourself out as a sound healer. But have you been healed by sound? If you haven't been through that process yourself, how are you going to lead someone else through that process? Therapists. I've met a lot of therapists in my life. If you're a therapist and you are a mess internally, maybe you can hide it, but I'm talking about internally when you're at home at night. Are you an internal mess trying to help people get their inner lives in order? A lot of therapists have not done that work, and they're trying to help other people get their lives in order. I'm just going to say it. I'm not going to give away names, none of that. That's not what I'm here for. But there are some spiritual teachers in the area locally, and this is not a big area. There are multiple spiritual teachers, people that are kind of head of groups that have serious personal issues, and they're not disclosing it. People with 4 DUIs in 10 years. 4 in 10 years, holding themselves out. And I saw the other day this person holding themselves out as having the ability to help people with substance abuse issues. This is somebody who got their 4th DUI in 10 years, just in March, I believe. Holding themselves out as being able to help others with substance abuse issues. There is a problem there. There is a big problem there. There's another group, well known. I've heard it mentioned by lots of people. I've even been to a couple of their events. One of the top people in that group, and this actually applies to the other one as well. One of the top people in that group uses a pseudonym. And this first person I mentioned with the 4 DUIs, they use a pseudonym as well. They don't use their real name. And I guess I'm being a skeptic when I say, but I think it's because you can find their 4 DUIs in 10 years if you do that. And then this other one, they don't use their legal name because they are on the sex offender registry. This is a group that holds itself out as a spiritual community. They do not disclose the presence of this sex offender there. I'm not saying we shouldn't have compassion for sex offenders, whatever. I'm not making any statement about that. But if you're hiding your name because you're on the sex offender registry and you're holding yourself out as somebody who's leading a spiritual group, there is a problem. You are an imposter. Use it. Don't lose it. If you have that sense, and I don't know that these people have that sense, maybe they don't have a sense that they're imposters, which is even more dangerous. So I guess that's the point I'm making here. If you feel like an imposter, you're an imposter because your life is a mess and you're trying to hold yourself out as somebody who helps others, you are an imposter. So that's one way that imposter syndrome helps. It points out when we are imposters and maybe it's time to step back for a while. Maybe it's time to step back and not offer to do something that we haven't even done for ourselves. And if you're somebody who feels imposter syndrome and you've done the inquiry, it's false. You're not an imposter. Objectively, you're not an imposter. You know it intellectually and you still feel like an imposter. There is still an opportunity to use that imposter syndrome to do some work. And this applies, I suppose, whether you're actually an imposter or not. But if you've done the hard work, you're not a 4-time DUI person with 4 DUIs in 10 years. And if you've just come on, real story, spiritual teacher here in Dayton, 4 DUIs in 10 years, most recent one in March. If you're not holding yourself out as that person offering help with substance abuse, if you're not the sex offender that's holding yourself out using a pseudonym as one of the leaders of a local group here, if you're not one of those people, you're actually an imposter if you're one of those people. If you're not one of those people, you've done the hard inquiry. Objective sources tell you, hey, you're not an imposter. You're truly an expert. You're a healer. You're a leader. Beautiful. But we can still use imposter syndrome because that sense of being an imposter is an identity issue. It's beautiful. It's like if you heat up gold, the dross rises to the top, and guess what? You can skim that dross off. Regardless of whether you're an imposter or not, imposter syndrome is showing you something important, so important. It's rising to the surface. Either you're an imposter or you have an identity issue. You're identifying yourself as something you're not. Actually, either way, you're identifying yourself as something that you're not. You're either identifying yourself as an expert and you're not, or you're identifying yourself as a non-expert when you are. Either way, but it gets deeper than that. Why do you feel like an imposter? What did you live? What is your lived experience that led to you feeling this sense of being an imposter, with the anxiety, with the depression, with the fear, everything that comes with imposter syndrome? What has brought you here, whether you're an imposter or not? I guarantee you that sense of being an imposter is fruitful ground for work. And I would love it if one of the people that I mentioned, and I didn't give anything away. I mean, if somebody already knows them, no problem. I'm not worried about that. It's not my place to identify who those people are. Though I would love it if one of them is listening to this. But whoever you are, whether you're an imposter or not, whether you're rightly or wrongly identifying the fact that you're not an expert in the area that you hold yourself out as an expert in, let's just get quiet here. If you're in a place where you can do it, if you're not driving, close your eyes. And if you're just coming in, you can come to this still place, and this is still going to be relevant. You don't have to have heard everything we've talked about to this point. Really settle into your seat. If you're lying down in your bed, feel gravity holding you here. The sense of filling out your skin, whatever that means to you. No right or wrong way to do it. Be here in your body. Experience it. The weight of the body supported by the ground, by the couch, by your bed. Notice the sounds around you. Birds singing. Ambient noises in the room. Sound of traffic outside. Sound of my voice and the other sounds filtering through the microphone. Settle into this place. Maybe take a hand to your chest, a hand to your stomach. Notice your breath. Just a few moments of quiet breath. Coming into that stillness. What we're going to do now is not a thinking process. So if you find your mind kind of the wheels turning, it's not what I'm suggesting here. This is a process of allowing the subconscious to bring forth what you need to see. You have amazing intelligence, maybe on the surface, but also beneath the surface. You know what you need beneath the surface of consciousness. Just know that, believe that. You don't have to believe me. You'll see for yourself if you've never experienced it. It comes up as intuition. Just be here for a few moments. Now, allow your mind to drift to that place where you feel like an imposter. Whether you did the exercise earlier in the stream or not, most importantly, feel the sensations in your body that come up with that sense of being an imposter. Do you feel a tightness in the chest? Such a common one. Pressure in the head, pain somewhere in the body, whatever it is. It's different for everyone. Where do you feel it in your body when you feel like an imposter? Allow yourself to feel it. It may be uncomfortable. Allow yourself to experience it. Be okay with that. Now, revisit a time in your life where you felt like this. It could be a week ago, a month ago, a year ago, 10 years ago. Travel back to that time. See the sights through your eyes at that time. Hear the sounds. Feel the sensations, the emotions. Be there. Allow that memory to play out. If it gets to the end, you can always go back to the beginning, running through it again. Revisiting a time when you felt like an imposter. Really pick up details, colors, shapes, textures, emotions, sensations. Notice the people around you in that memory. Just a few more moments. And as I said, this is not a thinking process, just experiencing. We're going to move into another phase here. Best thing you can do is just allow whatever comes up to come up. Allow whatever changes, whatever arises or falls away to arise or fall away. Just noticing, not trying to control the process. The most powerful thing you can do, just follow my simple instructions and allow the process to unfold within you. And even if you're just coming into the stream now and you haven't followed, just get quiet for a moment. Close your eyes, because even this last part by itself is enough. But if you're just coming in, you might find yourself slipping back to a memory of a time you felt imposter syndrome. It's like you're looking out of your eyes, re-experiencing that, just knowing you're there. Now, knowing you're in that place, feeling those feelings, that imposter syndrome, what I'm going to ask you to do, imagine a line like the second hand on a clock. It extends from the center of your chest up to the top of your head. No right or wrong way to do this, but it's like a clock face. It's on your chest. The second hand points from the center of your chest where it starts to the top of your head. Really feel that line as much as you can, especially in the head, right at the crown of the head. Now, that clock hand, it starts to move to one side or the other. There's no right or wrong side. Allow it to travel the direction that feels right. It travels down the side like the clock hand. It's moving down this one side, but really slow, feeling that side of your brain activating as it moves. It can feel like static, like pressure, like heat, like someone's finger is on your head, dragging down the side of your head. That clock hand centered at the chest now sweeps down through your ear, down the side of your neck. It comes around, eventually sweeping down through the tailbone, comes around the other side, coming up through the arm, eventually up through the shoulder, and then back through the other side of your head. Now, as we go, this sweeping happens. You might imagine it as a line of light. It doesn't really matter what you imagine, but really feel that line traveling. It eventually comes back to the crown of your head and continues that sweeping motion through the body, through the head. It sweeps again and again. As it sweeps, you don't need to think about the imposter syndrome. Allow what needs to develop. Insight may appear, it may pop out of nowhere. Maybe a certain realization comes up. You can feel a kind of release happen. Just allow it to be what it is as you sweep that clock hand through the head, through the body again and again. If you find yourself getting bored, annoyed, or even angry as you do this, that is not necessary. But if that's happening, know that's a sign that this is working. Bring it around. There's no conclusion we're looking for. We're just opening up and allowing this sweep to happen, but really focusing on the sensations in the head as you sweep from left to right or right to left. That line comes around. If you're having a hard time sweeping that big, you can always imagine the center of that clock hand at the bridge of the nose, and you're just sweeping through the head. It can be a little easier if you can do it. Sweep through the whole body and head. But if you need to, you can just sweep through the head. Bring that clock hand around again and again, really feeling it, maybe seeing it, maybe imagining it, but definitely feeling it. Sweeping it around again and again. Breathing with it. Maybe the breath comes into it. Maybe the breath empowers that sweeping sensation as it comes around. Bring it around. Breathing. Sweeping. And if you're following along, what I would encourage you to do, continue this process as long as it makes sense. Eventually, what will likely happen if you continue that sweep, I'm going to close down the stream soon, but if you can, continue that, you'll come to a place where everything feels settled. Maybe even the sensations in your body we started with have settled. Everything settles. When I conduct these one-on-one sessions using this process, it's much more personalized, and I can see physical symptoms in bodies and determine when the process is complete. I can't do that asynchronously through a stream. But you can feel into your body. You're going to know when you're done. When you're done, just stop and feel what's going on. Has anything cleared up? Has anything come up? Has anything changed? Do you have a new perspective? Has insight popped out? If you need anything, please feel free to reach out. I'm here for you. I'm not looking to charge. I'm here to talk. I got your back. If you need anything, reach out directly. Not trying to get business from you. I found something that worked. I want to spread it far and wide. This process I discovered for myself, retrocession. It's not a process of sweeping away things like imposter syndrome, because imposter syndrome can be powerful. It can be helpful. Whether you're an imposter or not an imposter, it provides insight. But what it'll do is integrate that imposter syndrome, the events in your life that lead to you feeling like an imposter. It's going to give you insight rather than just a bad feeling. And you're going to know where to go from there. Feel free to reach out if you want some assistance with that process. I appreciate you being here. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. See you next time.